2001 didn't start that morning. It started in 1996 when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed briefed Osama bin Laden on a plan to attack the United States. It wasn't until 1999, some 3 years later, that bin Laden gave Khalid Sheikh Mohammed the go-ahead to develop the final plans for that attack. On the night of September 10th, 2001, my wife and I were returning from Chicago on the last American flight leaving Chicago for LAX that evening. We had been in Chicago for a trade show in the business I'm involved with and had been there for about 5 days. Got home about 1 in the morning on the morning of the 11th, and because our biological clock was still on Chicago time, we woke up bright and early, just about 5:45 that morning. Turned on the bedroom TV just in time to hear the news that a plane had struck one of the World Trade Center towers. And the news was very confused, of course, in the first few minutes. They thought it was a private plane or maybe a commuter, but certainly a small aircraft, and it was definitely an accident. But as we watched, moments later, obviously a commercial-sized jet struck the other tower. And we realized then, as the news broadcasters did that morning, that this was by no means an accident. This was an attack on the United States by enemies unknown at the time. And if I could give you a little bit of a timeline that morning, these are Eastern times. At 7:59 a.m., American Flight 11, a flight which I had personally flown on, takes off from Boston bound for LAX. With a crew of 11, 76 passengers, and 5 hijackers. 47 minutes later, they would all be dead. Just 15 minutes later, at 8:14, United Flight 175 also took off from Boston bound for LAX with 9 crew, 51 passengers, and 5 hijackers. They would have just 49 minutes to live. At 8:20, American 77 takes off from Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. bound for LAX. Crew of 6, 53 passengers, and 5 hijackers. They would have a little longer to live, 1 hour and 17 minutes. At 8:42 that morning, United 93, taking off from Newark Airport in New Jersey, bound for San Francisco, had a crew of 7, 33 passengers, and 4 hijackers, and 55 minutes to live. At 8:46 that morning, American 11 crashes into the North World Trade Center tower, very high in the building. At 8:52, 2 F-15s from Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts were scrambled because by this time the flight controllers had realized there were at least 2 hijacked airplanes in the skies, perhaps 3. At 9:03, US 175, a plane from Boston, crashed into the South World Trade Center tower about mid-height in the building. 27 minutes later, at 9:30, Langley Air Force Base in Virginia scrambled more fighters, but for some reason were given directions to head east out over the Atlantic before being turned toward Washington. Just 7 minutes later, at 9:37, American 77 crashed into the Pentagon. At 9:40, the FAA issued an order to ground all aircraft in flight over the United States and to divert all incoming aircraft coming into the United States to either Canada or Mexico. That ruling would stand for 3 days. It's the only time it's ever been issued for our country. At 9:59, the South Tower, this is the one which damaged about mid-height, crashes to the ground. At 10:03, United 93, following an attempt by the passengers to take control of the aircraft because they had learned by this time, they knew they were hijacked, they had been calling their relatives and cell phones. They had learned of the other 3 hijacked aircraft, and they decided to take control of the airplane, which we learned later was bound for the U.S. Capitol. At 10:03, that plane crashed into an open field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, killing all aboard. At 10:20, Vice President Dick Cheney issued an order to shoot down any aircraft positively identified as hostile or as hijacked. At 10:28, the North Tower at the World Trade Center collapses. And the collapsing buildings of Towers 1 and 2 caused Tower 7 to collapse up later that afternoon at 5:21. In the North Tower, 1,355 people were on the floors above the impact point and all passed away. Below them, 107 more were killed. In the South Tower, 630 people died, and between the two towers, over 200 people either jumped or fell to their deaths to escape the fire. In the Pentagon, 125 Americans were killed. 55 of those were uniformed military. All told, 2,996 died that day. More than 500 that the Japanese killed at Pearl Harbor. And these people were killed by 19 hijackers, armed only with box cutters and pocket knives. In New York, 411 emergency people, including 340 New York Fire Department people, the fire department chaplain, 23 paramedics from the fire department, and civilian paramedics also perished. And one light note, in typical American fashion, Mohammed Atta, who was the pilot of American 11 after the hijacking, baggage failed to make the flight. It turned out it was located by the FBI days later and became a treasure trove of information that revealed who the 19 hijackers were, what their roles were, and what their plans were. That's a day that my wife and I will never forget. We were glued to the television throughout the entire day. And we mourn those people that we lost that day. Thank you very much.